And then we're going to spin this around. All right, go right ahead.
All right, good morning. This is the House Discrimination Prevention Panel. Good morning, everyone. Today we are going to review the revised discrimination prevention policy, not the procedures, but the policy that we worked on last week with the intent to come to a vote on this part. Damian, you want to take it away?
Sure, thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Damian Leonard, Legislative Counsel. The revised draft is posted on the panel's webpage. I am realizing now as I'm looking at it that some of my notes, which were notes to myself, I never edited. So for members of the public who are looking, you may see things like suggest alternative language that Mike is creating. That was just a reference to suggest alternative language that another staff person at Ledge Council had been working on in relation to the work that the Sexual Harassment Prevention Panel is doing. So I apologize for the informality of my notes and comments. So if we look through the policy, I've highlighted everywhere there's a change, and I've included notes where there may be a final tweak in the language. I have the document open on my laptop, so I can make those tweaks on the fly for the panel. So the first page there, you'll see we've switched in multiple places. We replaced individual with person. And so not a substantive change, just a style change referring to people as person rather than an individual. And this is to avoid confusion with the term regulated individual, because at some points it was getting difficult to tell whether it was an individual who'd experienced discrimination or an individual who had perhaps engaged in discrimination. You'll see a note on page 1 where it says suggest alternative language. The language we have in this policy right now is that workplace harassment may be verbal, physical, auditory, written, or visual, or a combination thereof. The alternative is that we could say workplace harassment may take many forms, including verbal, physical, auditory, or visual, or a combination thereof, and may be communicated by any means, which was the reason we had added written in there, was to try to cover things like text messages and emails. So that's the language that's in the current draft that the Sexual Harassment Prevention Panel is finalizing on Friday. No reason why you have to adopt their language. But we had worked on this with a group of 4 attorneys on Friday, trying to hammer out some changes to that policy to address some of the issues that had been raised. Are there panel thoughts on that? Or would you like me to keep moving through?
Well, I think being congruent with the other one. Clear.
So yeah, you'd be adding this sentence.
Yeah, so it would read, workplace harassment may take many forms, including verbal, physical, auditory, or visual, which is the existing language, or a combination thereof, and may be communicated by any means.
Yeah, that I'd like to hear from everyone, but I think that's a good addition.
Yep.
But they mean does written does not appear in that.
So written wouldn't appear in the new one because it'd be covered by maybe communicated by any means.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was the intent of that. In classic lawyer fashion, we were going through what if scenarios and trying to figure out if the language covered it, and we came to the conclusion that maybe communicated by any means kind of future proofs the policy as social media evolves and so forth. The workplace harassment could start to take new forms. So Let me make that change really quickly.
So that would include Snapchat.
Yep, that would include Snapchat. Um, okay. The next changes here. This is the language we had discussed last time. Workplace harassment need not be severe or pervasive to be a violation of this policy. However, workplace harassment does not include petty slights, minor annoyances, or disappointments that a person may encounter during their time in the State House. So the discussed reason for this is the law sets the standard at severe or pervasive currently. But the idea in the policy is to avoid getting to an illegal act. So the policy sets a tighter control on behavior, allowing us to basically address behavior early before it becomes an issue of legal liability. Going forward, on page 2, there are a number of changes of individual to person. That is it on that page. So you'll see a ton of yellow, but they're all places where we changed the word individual to person.
There's also professional working to work. Very bottom.
Oh, okay. My page is changed a little bit as I made that edit. So, but yes, so it's at the top of page 3 for me. But yeah, we're changing professional working to work environment. And this is addressing the question of, well, what do we mean by a professional working environment? When really it is, we're just trying to say this is a work environment that's free from discrimination.
I have 2 questions in this.
Okay.
However, a person is not required or expected. Do we need both of those? I mean, it's not required. Doesn't it say the same thing, or do you think it further clarifies?
So with that language, and you're talking about under the paragraph identify objectionable conduct, right?
Yes.
With that language, the idea is to basically say, not only are you not required, but you're not expected to attempt to confront the person who's discriminating against you. So they do say slightly different things. And I think the original intent with this language was to say, not only is it not a bar to you bringing a claim if you haven't confronted the person discriminating against you or to contacting the panel, but we don't expect you to do so. You can if you want, but there's no expectation that you will confront the person who's discriminating against you. And the reasoning behind this language when it was originally added was concerns about the power dynamic, particularly for new employees in the building, who may feel intimidated if the person who engaged in the inappropriate behavior is a member or a senior staff person or something like that, where they feel like they're going to endanger their career if they speak up, and may not feel comfortable making that step. So obviously it's a policy question for the panel, but there were 2 different intents behind those 2 different words there. Okay.
Yeah, I think it would be good if we could, unless there are major issues with the rest of the document, if we could stick to the changes that we've already made and approving those.
Okay. Did you have another question?
No, that is.
Okay. You'll see 3 changes from the bottom of page 2 on the page 3 where we changed professional working to work environment. And then the next note here is just consider moving the contact information to the end of the document. The only reason I bring that up is it's just kind of a large break in the middle. It is not a substantive issue. So if you want to just leave it where it is, that's also fine. This came up again in discussions with the sexual harassment prevention panel. The difference for them is their policy applies to the whole General Assembly rather than just the House. So their contact information list is literally pages long. So they've put it into an addendum at the end rather than keeping it in the middle. So do you want to leave it where it is or move it to the end?
Seems like it'd be better to move it to the end.
Okay. That is done. Just go ahead and make that change. All set.
Maury, may I ask another question?
Yes, please.
Okay, on page 3, if you contact the Office of Legislative Human Resources, that, and then when we have the contact information, that it's Arlene and Eliza from our Human Resources. When I had the issue with the ADA accommodations, I contacted them, she said, no, we don't deal with the legislators, we deal with the employees.
Right.
So is this, if this, I understand this is an employee, but if it's a legislator that is doing this, they probably shouldn't contact her for her office.
So I think in an ideal situation, the legislators wouldn't contact her, but if they do, I think the next step at that point is she'll refer them to the right person, which I hope is what happened with your issue. So, and if it isn't, then I think that's part of a bigger just conversation about, for example, if, you know, it's the same as if this panel receives a complaint about something that occurred in the Senate, where you don't have jurisdiction, but you might reach out to they don't have a discrimination policy, but you would probably reach out to the pro tem and say, who would handle this in the Senate? I think it's their rules committee, but I don't know. You know, especially if it was related to the behavior of a senator. And that would be, I think the question is, you could say for employees, you may contact the Office of Legislative Human Resources. But I do know that the Legislative Human Resources has become sort of a collecting point for a lot of questions related to work environment, whether it relates to employees or not. When it doesn't relate to employees, they're referring, or at least in most instances, they're referring it out to the Speaker's office, to legislative operations, to whoever might be able to handle the issue, Leg Council. And I hope that's what happened in your situation. But
Show me talk to you.
so
But you and I already been talking.
yeah,
But I think this signals something strange. If someone's actually in a vulnerable part and they feel like they've been harassed, and they call this person, that person, who we are telling them to call, and then she said, "Oh, I don't handle it here in the legislative council." It's actually confusing me. So if the employees of the State House, HR deals with, legislators have all this immunity stuff, and so then that's why. So
we could
we can
say,
leave it this way, and she will then refer, but it's just it's not a clean
yeah,
contact.
what we could say is you can insert the word staff before person. So it says a staff person may contact regarding any conduct that the staff person believes may be a violation of this policy in there. And so then for instances where it's an employee of the clerk's office or an employee of the Speaker's office, so it's a House employee, in that case, they would know that they're able to take advantage of this. And And that would still work throughout, and nothing would prevent a member from contacting HR, but they also would get the impression from reading the policy that HR could address their issue right away. Does that,
Well, if we do that, we have to add us another thing, maybe it's okay, like, we didn't beg here, but if we say staff there, then we have to have another sentence about the legislature.
so,
I'm okay with leaving it, it's just at this point, but
yeah, I mean, we already say an employee of the General Assembly may contact the employee's supervisor in the paragraph above. Oh, no, we do that in the, I'm reading two policies side by side. I apologize. So this is a change that the sexual harassment panel made, is because of supervisor, legislators don't have supervisors. They've said an employee may contact the employee's supervisor. So we could also say an employee may contact the Office of Legislative Human Resources. Do it in both instances. They have not added another sentence because their understanding was just that it's obvious that members are not employees.
Yeah,
So-
that sounds good.
Does that work for the panel? I'll make that change in both.
I'm seeing one nodding head. Look at all those
Yeah.
nodding heads.
Okay. Okay, so the first paragraph, contact a supervisor, now reads, an employee may contact the employee's supervisor regarding any conduct that the employee believes may be a violation of this policy, regardless of whether the individual engaging in that conduct is a regulated individual. All supervisors have a legal obligation to provide a work environment free from discrimination and to take immediate, excuse me, and appropriate action to ensure that discriminatory conduct does not continue. The next paragraph, contact the Office of Legislative Human Resources. An employee may contact the Office of Legislative Human Resources regarding any conduct that the employee believes may be a violation of this policy, regardless of whether the individual engaging in that conduct is a regulated individual. The Office of Legislative Human Resources has a legal obligation to ensure that the General Assembly is a work environment free from discrimination and to take immediate and appropriate action to ensure that discriminatory conduct does not continue. The main difference between those two paragraphs is that supervisors have a legal obligation to provide a work environment free from discrimination because they often have authority over just a discrete area at the General Assembly. A discrete set of offices, whereas the Office of Legislative Human Resources has jurisdiction over all employee offices throughout the General Assembly's buildings. So,
I hate to do this. I'm going to have to leave shortly.
okay.
The meeting was scheduled for 15 minutes. Unless there's anything that we of significant that we need to change. Looks like the last one is your notes to consider making at the bottom of the page,
Yep.
filing a charge to a complaint.
Yeah, so the this was language that I copied from the Department of Labor's model language, and filing a complaint or making a complaint may be more clear to people than filing a charge, which sounds like you're prosecuting a criminal case. So that was just highlighted to me by one of my colleagues. I see heads nodding on that change.
Yeah, and I think we use the word complaint and complainant
Yep.
routinely in the policy.
So that's it. The other changes in here were all just changing individual to person. So I can send a clean copy of the draft to the panel. And I think, Madam Chair, this is ready to vote if you want to entertain a motion.
I have more questions.
Okay,
So I guess, Maury, we have to have another meeting. I don't know.
we're meeting on Friday, right, to go through the procedures?
Yeah, can you
Or
maybe
is that next
send
Friday?
send us your questions ahead of the meeting so that we can be prepared to answer them? Because we,
No,
we
I
have-
didn't know it's a 15-minute meeting, so. Can
what's
we-
that?
Meeting without you? We're not.
No, I'm asking, I'm asking that we adjourn now, and between now and Friday, you send us by email a list of your questions so that we can address them. And again, our concern is that we also have to go through the procedure on Friday and make sure that we are able to vote both of these out by the end of session, which is looming.
I think the meeting is a week from Friday, right?
We didn't have another meeting for this panel scheduled at this
Okay.
time.
So next Friday.
Yeah, well, so we don't have one scheduled. I don't know. But we've been meeting every other week, so that would be the 29th. But that would also put us, and I'm knocking on wood and crossing my fingers and toes, a week out from the end of session, which could be very tight.
And I wonder if, I mean, Representative Kalaki, we have frequently revised and updated this policy and will continue to do so. And I'm wondering if you could think about whether these are changes that could be made when we meet again, whoever we are, depending on the election, at the beginning of the biennium. And the other option is I think will only be authorized to meet in the off session for processing complaints. Not for working on policy. So how about, it sounds like we're not having a vote today. Let's adjourn and have some conversations about how we're gonna move forward. Any other comments, suggestions?
Is there a date sooner than the 29th, or is that not something that you want to consider?
I think we tried that already, but we can look again.
Yeah, I mean, the sexual harassment prevention panels have been meeting every week too. So I've been switching off with Jen Carvey from our office on those. If necessary, I think she could take that and I can take this. I know they're also pushing to try to get something out in order to give the Senate time to hopefully approve the policy so that they don't end up running out of time like happened a few years ago. But I think I'm available in the mornings. If the committee can be available, I can make myself available. And then if committees start finishing up, we may also be able to squeeze in meetings when there are breaks from the floor and that sort of thing.
And Representative Kalaki, are you able to send the panel your questions and concerns by email as soon as possible?
Yes, I could have spoken about them in 2 minutes in the last 15 minutes. So yeah, I can, but I feel like this process, why don't we just set up another meeting for the next part? And I'll do that. And
We want to allow, I mean, it may take you 2 minutes, but we also want to allow time for the discussion may need to be full enough that it would last longer than 2 minutes. So I really do have to go.
okay,
And we can schedule the next meeting to be a little bit longer. I think we were originally planning to just vote on the changes that we made on last week. So I wasn't expecting to work on further editing.
Apologize, Madam Chair. There were a few issues that we identified going through it.
Okay. Representative Small,
Can I propose that we meet Friday morning at 8:30, our usual time? This Friday,
Is that doable?
the 22nd.
Yeah.
8:30, and I'll try to get the energy and technology room so it's a little bit more Zoom friendly.
Thank you so much. Does that work for you, Madam Chair?
yeah, and Damien, you'll
Yep.
do your switch.
Well, I'll coordinate with Joe.
Okay. Great, and then we'll have more time.
Yeah, very good.
All right, thanks, everyone.